get started in about 10 seconds.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back from council break. I hope everyone got some time to spend with family.
are outside of those lines, in order to, maybe work around a tree or some other water courses or anything like that. But it's supposed to be relatively unnoticeable to the pedestrian or the site user. So currently the DVP process, right now, it's all DVP applications come before council. And so this bylaw before you essentially creates So this bylaw before you essentially creates a new process that you can see here on the left. So it kind of creates, if a DVP application meets a certain threshold that's here in the bylaw today, it meets the guidelines and criteria, it can be referred to the Director of Planning for review and up to the Director of Planning or their delegate to issue the DVP or deny the DVP, or the Director of Planning could refer it to council if it doesn't meet some of the guidelines or if council has any concerns. That gets noted at first and second reading as part of a rezoning application. And then the applicant from there, similar to our other delegated bylaws, have the opportunity to seek an appeal or reconsideration where it refers to council. We'll get into that a little bit later. But essentially, by creating this new process, it can save up to 8 weeks on development DVP application. So to enable the ability to delegate the minor DVP to staff, council has to pass a bylaw that includes the criteria that sets out what is considered to be a minor DVP, and that's up to the municipality to define, as well as guidelines that the delegate, such as the Director of Planning, must consider when considering to issue a minor DVP. So the bylaw can propose a number of areas in order to be considered a minor DVP. The 3 that are bolded here are just what Maple Ridge has considered at this time. So siting, so our lot line setbacks, our height, and our off-street parking and loading requirements. The other 3, such as signs and landscaping, aren't being considered at this time, but should council be interested, we could definitely take another look. So here on the screen are just some of the proposed guidelines that the Director of Planning or their delegate must consider when reviewing a DVP application. So looking to see whether or not there's any bylaw or nuisance violations on the property. Does it align with our official community plan, including our development permit area guidelines, so our form and character? It can't increase the number of stories. It can't vary land use. It can't vary density. It shouldn't be in conflict with any of the other bylaws, and negatively impact neighborhood context is also considered as one of our guidelines. So those are our guidelines. So getting into the criteria of what we might consider a minor DVP. So for the lot line setbacks, which is one of the 3 areas that we're considering within this bylaw, we've kind of grouped it into principal and accessory buildings and based it on the lot size itself. So if you're on a lot that's over 557 meters squared, so our larger lots for all land uses, you may be able to receive a variance up to 20% that the director might be able to sign off on. Doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get the whole 20%, but that's kind of the maximum threshold. And if you're on a smaller lot that's less than 557 meters squared, only up to 15%. So what does this actually might look like? So on our larger RS1 single detached lots, you might go from a front or rear setback line from 7.5 to 6.75, and that's the maximum 20%. But on our smaller R1 single detached lot, where the front setback is only 5.5 meters squared currently, you might be able to receive a variance about that half a meter. Overall, that half a meter is kind of considered the benchmark of kind of what we're considering, or the maximum that they might be able to work out to. That's kind of here on the screen. So in terms of the third area for height, for proposed criteria. We're looking at up to 10% of a height variance for all uses except for single detached and duplexes. So that means the RS1 single detached and R1 single detached would be excluded from this, all single detached and duplexes. But the RT2, ground orientated residential, could receive up to 10%. So going from 8 to 8.8. But remember, going back to those guidelines, there are that caveat, it can't increase the number of stories of the building. It can't vary the land use. It can't increase the density. It's really to assist with those architectural features and variation. And then the third area for criteria and the last for the parking bylaw is, or not the parking bylaw, for the DVP bylaw is up to 10% or less of the motor vehicle off-street parking spaces. So not varying bicycle or anything else part of that bylaw, but just the car area. And applications that are in the payment in lieu area wouldn't be applicable. If they're a single detached, wouldn't be applicable. If they have a secondary suite, detached garden suite also wouldn't be applicable. Same with duplexes, accessible parking spaces, and visitor parking would be excluded from this. So again, the single detached wouldn't be, the director of planning wouldn't be able to sign off on that kind of variance. But for an RT2, which is kind of our multifamily, kind of lower threshold of multifamily, they may be able to receive a variance of 1 space. And then obviously working off that 10%, the more spaces that's requested, the more variance may be there, but it can only go up to that 10%. In their report back in February, staff proposed a 15%, but after hearing council's concerns, we lowered it to 10%. And so we brought it for you here today. So in terms of a municipal scan of update from the February, there's 5 municipalities that have brought forward minor DVP bylaws, and roughly 2 of them are looking at varying up to 25% of their zoning bylaw requirements for height, setbacks, parking, where the others have left it up to the delegate. The city of Coquitlam's also considering up to 25%. So as you can see, Maple Ridge is slightly lower, but we're also creating very clear guidelines for everyone who's involved, staff to applicants, of what is that threshold of a minor DVP. So in terms of the appeal requests, it's very similar to our other appeal processes for trees or soil permits. The applicant, if they don't agree with the delegate's decisions, they can apply to council within a certain timeline in order for council to make a decision on the application itself. And then once council makes the decision, that decision is final. So in terms of next steps, we are here today at COW, and later, should council move it forward, it would go forward to the council later today for first and second reading. And should taking any council comments into consideration, we'd go back and finalize the bylaw and then come back for third and final. And the one thing we'll mention is we'd come back for a 1-year review to see how it's working and to see if there's any changes we could implement to make it more efficient or other opportunities. So should council move it forward, the recommendation is here on the screen.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Mover to move it forward, Mayor Rumi. Seconder, Councillor Carreras, and any questions? Councillor Youssef and then Mayor Rumi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation and the report. I very much appreciate this coming forward. And I very much appreciate staff answering my question before even asking it and highlighting that there would be an 8 weeks time savings that would result from this new process. That also speaks to the cost savings that will come of it. Through the chair to staff, my question is though, why are we excluding RS1 zoning from being able to access the streamlined process?
So through the chair, just to clarify, for the R1 zone, for the height or the parking, those are the single detached that's excluded for this. We were just hearing from council's concerns, but if council is interested in including single detached housing forms, that could be delegated to the director of planning to sign off. We're more than happy to make that change.
Thank you for that. I'll reserve my comments for council later on today, but that's the kind of the direction that I'm leaning towards. And secondly, through you, Madam Chair, to staff, when we're rejigging our process, how would this, if I may peek behind the curtain a little, how would this affect staff's workload as well as what internal adjustments would be visible to applicants coming through City Hall?
So through the chair, should this process get implemented, it essentially would decrease staff workload because there wouldn't have to be a council report. It can essentially be a memo to the director of planning. And then obviously not going through the COW process, waiting 2 weeks and then going to council. So it can be accelerated by that 8 weeks. It's just lighter on staff.
Thank you very much for that. That was my hope. Thank you for the for those clarifications. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Rumi.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just a couple of questions and through the chair to staff. Could we go back to the second slide where you had the flow chart, please? Okay. Yeah, that one. A little confused with issue the DVP and then applicant request reconsideration. It's just a technical matter on the flow chart. Is that correct?
So through the chair, the director of planning could issue a DVP, but the director could attach terms and conditions, or the applicant may not like whatever the director has issued, so they can apply to council for that reconsideration.
Okay, so when the director issues the DVP, perhaps it's not all to the developer's liking, so they can come to council.
Correct.
Okay, so the second question I have is, I mean, I understand the time saving and what have you of all of this. Where is the accountability portion to council? Do we get to see what those decisions have been made, or is it just go ahead and do this, this is done, and we don't see anything? Do we see anything at all in this?
So through the chair, it's a little bit 50-50. So if the DVP is attached to a rezoning application, the variances that are requested would likely be included in the report, but more as an FYI that these variances are being requested and they meet the threshold. And so if council wanted to comment at that point, that's well within council's ability. And the director of planning would take that into consideration. However, if it's not connected with the rezoning and say someone's just coming in for building permits and they just need a little bit of wiggle room, that wouldn't come before council, and there would be, wouldn't really know of the decision at that point unless they came for reconsideration.
So I guess the question is, while the director can issue the DVP, does council at any point, for whatever reason, can council actually override that for whatever reason?
Through the chair, if the director of planning issues the DVP and the applicant does not appeal it, no, council wouldn't have any notes other than what's informed at a rezoning application.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To you to staff. Thank you, Ms. Gowan, for the presentation. Thank you for being the first one up after the break. A few questions. I noticed that we have signs and landscaping not included within this draft bylaw. What was the rationale for that?
So through the chair, the signs bylaw is through our building department. They're the ones that regulate it. And I believe they were considering changes to the sign bylaw itself that would take care of some of that. It just wasn't being considered at this time. And then landscaping staff felt that some of our landscaping requirements are already kind of minimal. And so having any kind of reduction at this point just wasn't considered, and it wasn't brought before council back in February.
Okay. Thank you for that. And through you again, Madam Chair, I'm noticing that when we did the municipal scan, we had some of these other municipalities with variances up to 25%, which I'm taking as sort of like the threshold or the standard that the region is moving to. And when I saw the table up there, that many of our variances don't reach that 25% mark. And why is that? I'm sensing a bit of a cautious approach here that we're attempting. Why is that? Why that caution compared to what I'm seeing other municipalities attempt?
Through the chair. So it's partly from other municipalities have different setbacks than what we do. So 25% in a Burnaby will look different than a Maple Ridge. But it was also what was presented to council back in February, kind of following in line with council's comments. So we are taking on paper a more conservative approach, but what it might actually look like would likely be similar to a Burnaby or North Vancouver.
And could you spell that out for me, please? I'm not sure if I understand that. So Burnaby setbacks are smaller or larger, or if you could just flesh it out for me, please.
So without speaking on behalf of the city of Burnaby or North Vancouver, their setbacks are smaller than Maple Ridge, where, for some of our single detached, we have 7.5 meters. And so doing the 20% versus their 25%, doing the rough calculations, it kind of shakes out to being that 0.5 meter minor variance between what's allowed in the zoning bylaw and then what could be signed off by the director of planning or their delegate. Yeah.
Right. So in absolute terms, we're the setback, given our percentages are smaller, but our setbacks are larger. We're seeing that in absolute terms, the setback that may be permissible through this delegated authority will be roughly the same. We would still leave Maple Ridge residents with a larger setback after the reduction, given that we have larger setbacks to start with.
Essentially looking at, for like a front yard setback, looking between municipalities of a setback of or a variance of 0.5 meters. That's kind of what we were looking for and how we came to the 20%.
Thank you. Okay, that's helpful. And just the last question there just to follow up on Mayor Rumi's question about council and their ability to review decisions. I'm curious about the other municipalities. Do those councils also then review the decisions by directors, or do they is it completely a delegated authority?
So the ones that have implemented, it's completely delegated authority.
Right.
And the other municipalities that they haven't outlined a criteria, so they haven't even done a 25% threshold. They've just left it to the discretion of the delegate. So some municipalities have taken a very broader approach of what might be considered a minor DVP.
Right. And so for those municipalities, just to make sure I understand, those councils don't review decisions, they leave it up to the director, and the criteria is actually a little more broader than the ones we have. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. So call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 5.2.
Item 5.2 is 2023-281 RZ to allow for larger detached garden suites on residential lots, and staff are present to present the report. And I'll just skip that.
All right. So the bylaw that's before you today builds on many years of work that was presented back in July of this year, just July 11th, a couple months ago. But it all started on April 26th back in 2022 at a council workshop when council of the day was presented with regulatory options to expand the secondary suite and attached garden suite regulations, where council gave direction for staff to bring forward a report that provides the detailed information and description of what it might look like permitting a larger DGS in specific residential zones. And at the July 11th workshop, just a couple months ago, That's what staff brought forward. So council received that information of what it might look like. And at that workshop, the council passed a resolution for this bylaw to come forward, essentially to permit detached garden suites up to 140 meters squared or 15% of the lot area, whichever is less, in the zones that already permit a detached garden suite. So this piece of work aligns with the housing policy and landscape currently in Maple Ridge. So it aligns with our housing policies because we encourage a mix of housing types, densities, and affordable. It aligns with our housing action plan strategies because it's creating new rental opportunities and expanding the DGS program. And it aligns with what was found in the housing needs report, as it found there was limited options for seniors looking to downsize, and that DGSs might be able to provide that suitable option. And from the two engagement sessions or two engagement processes that happened before this, that's in line with what we heard with people looking to downsize, but also live on the same lot where their kids are looking to also live. So in terms of what is changing here on the table is what currently allowed for a DGS. Just a quick reminder, it's only allowed on lots that have a minimum lot size of 557 meters squared. They have to have parking requirements, permitted on the ground level unless they're on a larger lot. But right now, the maximum floor area is 90 meters squared or 10% of the lot area, whichever is less. And the bylaw before you is proposing to change that to 140 meters squared or 15% of the lot area, whichever is less, unless they're in the ALR, because the ALR has their own maximum of 90 meters squared, so that would not be changing. And there's no proposed changes on where DGSs are allowed in the city. So this change would be a change to the zoning bylaw in order to allow more livable DGSs and offer homeowners more flexibility on the number of bedrooms being provided, especially on our smaller lots in the urban area boundary, which will most likely affect the most. There are approximately over 11,000 properties that would be eligible to build a larger DGS, and only 13% of those are outside of the urban area boundary. So a lot of people would benefit from that 15% bump. And approximately only 4,000 would be able to build that maximum 140 meters squared, and they're on our larger lots, and half of those are outside of our urban area boundary. In terms of next steps, we're here at Committee of the Whole based off of the council workshop. Tonight, should council move it forward, it would go for first and second reading. It would go for public hearing and then third and final reading. And should council move it forward, the recommendation is here on the screen.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to move it forward? Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Carreras. Any questions? Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you to staff for the presentation. Happy to see this body of work come forward. Through you, Madam Chair, to staff, just for the public's sake, if I may, inquire as to why we're going to public hearing on this item and not the previous.
So through the chair, public hearing is required when we're amending the zoning bylaw. If we're just bringing a bylaw forward, then a public hearing is not required.
Thank you for that. And just wanted to clarify that for the public in case they're seeing that we're sending one to public hearing and not the other. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to staff.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, moving on to 5.3, Madam Clerk.
Item 5.3, 2023-185 AL. It's for 22761 132nd Avenue. And it's regarding a non-adhering residential use in the agricultural land reserve. And staff are present to present the application.
Good morning, everyone. This presentation is for, sorry, can you go back to the previous one? Thank you. And this presentation is for the non-adhering residential use in the agricultural land reserve for the property located on 22761 132nd Avenue. And the purpose of this application is to request to maintain the existing residences while the new residences will be under construction, provided that no more than 2 residences will be existing at any given time during the term of construction and after occupancy. And the subject property is currently zoned RS3 single detached rural residential, which basically allows both residential as well as agricultural use as a primary use. The property is also designated agricultural under the official community plan, as well as being designated as an agricultural land reserve, which means that any use of this property, in addition to the requirement of the zoning bylaw, is also subject to the Agricultural Land Commission Act and all of these associated regulations. In 2019, the Agricultural Land Commission Act, or ALCA, was revised in order to require the ALC Agricultural Land Commission to not permit or grant any permission for additional residences unless it's really necessary for the operation of the farm uses. That required that any basically application for any additional residences, as well as construction of the primary residence while the existing residence is under occupation, require a non-adhering residential use in ALR application, which is basically the case for this application. In those circumstances, the applicant will be required to make a non-adhering residential in ALR application, and the city will be required to review the application and provide comments and recommendation for ALC, or authorize the application to proceed to ALC. And the subject property currently contains two principal residences. The applicant is proposing to replace both residences with the new ones in a way that he will apply for a new building permit for the principal residence while they're occupying the existing residences. And then upon the completion of the project and occupancy permit, he will either decommission or demolish one of the buildings. And we will continue the same with the second residences to ensure that at no any given time during the construction or after occupancy, more than two residential will be existing or occupied on the property. And this is to ensure that this property will meet the ALCA as well as ALR use regulation, which limits the number of residences on any property that are designated ALR to one primary residence, one secondary suite, as well as one detached garden suite. And this is the site plan of showing the new residences, which include one primary residence with a floor area of not exceeding 500 square meters and one detached garden suite with a floor area of not exceeding 90 square meters. The existing residences to the basically to the right side of the new building will be decommissioned or demolished, and there will be a restrictive covenant to ensure removal or decommissioning of these buildings. The proposed building will be within the farm home plate, will be in line with the requirement of the zoning bylaw. Considering that this new building will be outside of the 50 meter from the top of the bank, no water course protection DP is required. And given that, although this property will be is in the floodplain area, will be subject to the flood construction elevation, we will not also require a natural features development permit. In general, this development is in line with the official community plan. No further amendment is required. And so upon consideration of council, this report is recommending that this application will be forwarded to ALC for the review and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To have a mover, Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Schiller. Any questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And 5.4, Madam Clerk.
Item 5.4 is 2023-183RZ to rezone the property at 12129 Edge Street from RS1 to RM2, and staff are in attendance to present the application.
Thank you. This presentation is for the rezoning application 2023-183-RZ for the property located on 12129 Edge Street, requesting council to grant first reading to the zoning amendment bylaw 7953-2023. The reason that we are requesting council only to grant first reading is that this application had been received prior to July 25th, 2023, where the amendment to the development procedure bylaw was adopted, requiring that only a complete application should be received and will be forwarded to council for combined first and second reading. The purpose of this rezoning application is to rezone the property from RS1 single detached residential to RM2 medium density apartment residential, as well as redesignate the property from park to low-rise apartment to allow the construction of a 6-story rental building with 2 levels of underground parking containing 165 dwelling units, which a minimum 20% of which will be below 30% of the median income for families in Maple Ridge. The subject property is located within town center and between 224th and Edge Street, abutting a lane to the south, and is located Maple Court apartment residential to the west. The property is currently designated park under the town center area plan, but redesignation of the property to low-rise apartment will be required in order to support this rezoning application. And this land use designation is in line with the properties to the north. As you see, the property is currently vacant. The applicant is proposing to construct this new 6-story rental building in order to help the relocation of the resident of the Maple Court apartment, which is located to the west of the property. This building, the existing building, is at the end of its lifespan, and the applicant is planning to redevelop this property. I have to note that the Maple Court building is currently zoned RM3, which allows construction of an apartment building between 5 to 12 story with a maximum base density of 1.2 FSR and additional density of up to 3.6 and subject to approval of a development permit. As such, no further rezoning will be required for redevelopment of the Maple Court apartment. And the applicant is also planning to apply for the funding through CMAC for the construction of the new 6-story apartment building, which, as one of the eligibility requirement, is basically providing a minimum of 20% of the unit be rented at 30%, below 30% of the median income for the families in Maple Ridge. Upon the initial review of this application, staff has raised 2 concerns regarding this application. One was the loss of park designated land. Under the town center area plan, this property, in addition to 4 single-family lots to the south of this property, has been designated as park. In addition to these properties, there are Rec Franklin Park to the north, as well as the future park on 227th Street, close to Eric Langton Elementary School, that they were also designated for future neighborhood park. However, considering that this new 6-story building will provide further rental and non-market rental dwelling unit for the resident, and it will help with the relocation of the existing residents of Maple Court apartment, staff believe that there will be some community benefit in supporting this the redesignation of the subject site from park to low-rise apartment. However, to ensure that there will be adequate parkland for the residents of this neighborhood, staff will prioritize the redevelopment of the future park on 227 as part of redevelopment of Eric Langton Elementary School in collaboration with the school district. The second concern that the staff had was regarding the development potential of the single-family home to the south of the subject site. Unfortunately, due to the shallow depth of those properties, the development potential of those properties are extremely limited if they wanted to redevelop independently. As such, the staff requested the applicant to negotiate with the property owners to purchase them, acquire them, and include them in the development side. However, the applicant indicated that they made multiple efforts to make an agreement with the property owner, and they were not able to reach an agreement, purchase agreement. In order to avoid further delay of this application, the applicant requested to proceed with this application for now while they continue negotiating with the property owners. The Proposed 6-story building will have a density of 2.43 FSR, including 1.8 base density in addition to additional density for provision of underground parking and the density bonus. Considering that this is going to be a rental building, there is no CAC will be required if the applicant agreed to enter into a housing agreement. Considering that this application is at the preliminary stage, further revision to the drawings and the site plan will be provided. However, the preliminary proposed unit mix would be the provision of 61% 1 bedroom, 33% 2 bedroom, and 6% 3 bedroom. This is the preliminary site plan, which I mentioned that it would be subject to change, which shows the road dedication off of Edge Street. This is the preliminary building elevation. So upon council consideration of this application, this report is recommending that no further public consultation will be required for the OCP amendment, except the posting of the OCP amendment on the city website and inviting public to provide comments, as well as requesting council to grant first reading to the zoning amendment bylaw and requesting the applicant to provide further information and technical report for the rezoning, OCP amendment, as well as development permit applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I do see the applicant is online. Do you know if they wanted to make a presentation or just available to answer questions?
I do believe they're here to kind of answer any question if it's required.
Okay, thank you very much. So could I get someone to move it forward? Councillor Youssef, seconded by Mayor Rumi. Any questions? Councillor Schiller, then Councillor Youssef, then Councillor Carreras.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. So you mentioned that the land is currently vacant. Is that correct? Okay, I'm a little rusty here. Okay, and it's designated as a park. So if this rezoning didn't go ahead, what would that mean? Like, would the land then just sort of remain vacant properly? I don't think that I've seen a case before where parkland is privately owned. So I'm just sort of trying to understand what the ultimate possibilities are for this piece of land.
Through Madam Chair, if it's possible, I wanted to defer this question to our Director of Park.
Existing, I can just talk about the zoning a little bit first. The existing zoning is RS1, and being privately held, you could build a house on it under the current RS1 zoning, but you wouldn't be able to rezone it to another use other than park unless the OCP is changed as is being proposed in this application.
Thank you.
Good morning. So in these circumstances where property is designated as park, really the intent is that the city would work with willing sellers to purchase the property. So ultimately, that would be what we're looking for. If the city does not have the ability to purchase the property within 5 years, then we would have to look at redesignation.
Okay, so has there been any discussions then between city staff and this property owner about the city purchasing this particular piece?
There has not been. The property owner desires to develop the property.
Gotcha. Okay. And I noticed that I don't know if this is a parks question, it might be though, the intergenerational garden, is that part of this particular property or is it just next to it?
Through the chair to Councillor Schiller's question, the intergenerational garden is one of the properties on the south to this. So this property before you is vacant land. And there are, I believe, 4 residences and intergenerational garden on the south side. There we go.
There we go.
4 residences and the intergenerational garden on the corner.
Okay, so those are separate properties. Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation and report. A couple of quick questions through you, Madam Chair, to staff. Has the applicant shared the relocation plans for the residents of Maple Court? And secondly, has there been any discussion or mention between staff and the applicant in their discussions of the possibility of having some commercial space on the eastern side of the building, recognizing that neighborhood and seeing that the closest corner store would be 228th and Dudney, and then there is a major grocery store on Dudney and 224th, but in that corner, I believe the school would, or students as well as parents would be able to utilize if there was any commercial space. So just those two questions through you, Madam Chair.
Through Madam Chair, I don't believe there have been any conversation regarding the relocation of existing residents. As I mentioned, that the redevelopment of the Maple Court would be a completely separate application. So at the beginning, the first phase was to bring forward this application to gauge council support for the rezoning, whether this rezoning as well as redesignation will be supportable. Because if there is no one, council choose to deny this application, there will not be a 6-story building for the relocation. And then as this application proceeds, the applicant is planning to submit their DP application for the Maple Court, and the relocation plan will be discussed as part of that application. Regarding the second question, that no, we haven't discussed the provision of commercial because there is a desire from the applicant to use this building for the rental as well as non-market rental. So they will also be subject to the funding from the CMAC and those eligibility requirement. So that hasn't been discussed.
Thank you very much for those clarifications, and I'm hoping that the applicant being online, they may be able to chime in or at least take note. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carreras.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the south side properties again. So what I got from the report in your presentation today is the developer is hopeful to attain those south side properties. So then my question goes back to the intergenerational garden. If they're able to attain all those south side properties, that would include the intergenerational garden. And so is there a plan in place to relocate within a similar space the intergenerational garden? And I don't know what the redevelopment of the elementary school is. That a possibility?
Thanks for the question. It is possible for the intergenerational garden to stay at this location, depending on what the future configuration of the south side properties looks like. But I can say if there were any plots that were impacted, then we would absolutely look to create a new community garden within this area. So there's several opportunities, and you've pointed to one of them on the east side of Eric Langton, Reg Franklin, and Fletcher Park.
Just to follow up on that, because it's a question, just because it's such an important piece to both the community and the school district. Because of the timing of the redevelopment of Eric Langdon and the risk of that corner piece being needed, is it in our best interest to talk about that sooner rather than later?
It's actually a report coming to council next week.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and now Councillor Tam.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing, that when we discussed this development of the site with the applicant and the possibility of acquiring the property to the south, that has been one of the conversation that maybe they can provide space within the development site that would be used for the resident as well as provided access to the public. This is not off the table yet, but again, because this is really preliminary and we wanted to bring this application forward to gauge council support, we can discuss this further with the applicant as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for Ms. Shahzadeh for the presentation and a couple of questions. So I think two categories, two buckets of questions. One bucket about the building and one bucket about the relocation plan for Maple Court. I know that's sort of part of a separate application, but and there's a lot of ties between the two. So I just want to make sure I understand. You know, I'm sure we're excited about the non-market rental, and I'm curious to understand more about the unit mix. I'm seeing there's a great unit mix of 2-bedroom, and then I'm seeing a 6% unit mix for 3-bedroom. I wonder if the applicant would like to comment or if staff have any comments on sort of what the possibility is of bumping up that 6%.
Through Madam Chair, the changing the unit mix has been discussed by the applicant. And as I mentioned, that this is a really preliminary plan. We haven't approved the unit mixes or the building design or anything. This is more like, gauging council support. As soon as, if council chooses to grant first reading, the applicant will be required to send their complete application, which will be basically the finalized unit mix. The applicant is aware of our 10% recommended 3-bedroom units. And so they are somehow obligated, or they are planning to provide the same unit mix for the residents in Maple Court because they're hoping that they can relocate the existing residents. I believe the Maple Court dwelling unit is around 105 units. So there will be some additional unit that will be provided, and we can work with the applicant to increase the number of family size unit, especially 3-bedroom unit. And the applicant has been open to the conversation to kind of include this information in their revised complete submission.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. The unit number and the sort of the walkthrough about the unit mix, I'm sure. Yes, it seems like we want everything and a lot of it. So thank you for bearing with us. And also, just to make sure I understand, to follow up on Councillor Yusuf's question about the retail walk-up or commercial on the first floor, I'm curious if the applicant wants to comment as well. Just following on Councillor Yusuf's question, is it just because since it's here to sort of gauge council interest, I think there's sort of interest around the floor for the retail walk-up. I'm wondering if the applicant would like to comment. Is it market demands or sort of just to give us an understanding of why that is maybe not yet part of the initial application?
Sure.
Okay, so Mr. Russell, I see you're online. If you're able to answer that question, can you raise your hand, please, and turn on your video? And his mic, yeah. Okay, the mic is on, but I need your video on too.
Hi everyone. I'm just get this video on quickly.
I see the video icon isn't on, but I don't see the video.
Yeah, I'm unable to get onto the video side. But thank you very much. I just wonder if I could just continue on this.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you, council and staff, for taking this application. So yes, so to that question on the Edge Street, we can commit to commercial retail on that east side. I think it's a great idea. We can obviously commit to a restaurant, which we've done in Vancouver, Homer Street, Tableau and Maxine's. Whether we want to do something else there, we can obviously discuss this, as well as keeping the community park. I think that's another question we can get into a bit later in the stage of this. But yeah, just to go further, this is obviously phase 1 of the 2 projects. This is to move the Maple Court residents across, 108 units across, obviously at a below market rental. I think we've got 165 units here. So there's 2/3 of that is going to be below market rental anyway. And then that will facilitate the first phase while we get the DP and BP ready for Maple Court redevelopment, as the rental there is it's aging and it's to be honest, it's falling apart there. So we need to drastically change that up. So that's why phase one on Edge Street is crucial for this.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Tan, did you have any other questions?
Thank you for that. That's helpful. And I just wanted to check in with my time, Madam Chair.
You
Okay.
still have another minute.
I have
A minute and 11 seconds.
Okay, I have a questions about thank you for that, Mr. Russell. That was helpful. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that we want all things in large quantities. So thank you for bearing with our questions. And I have a question for the relocation plan for the Maple Court residents. And please feel free, Madam Chair, once my time is up. I'm concerned, I'm curious about what our plan for those residents are. I understand that's an aging building that we need to have some plans for those residents. I understand those residents the ideas would then move to this new building. And then during the time of the redevelopment of the current Maple Court apartments. And I'm just curious about then, do they stay there? Do they move back? And then I'm also curious about then the rental rates for those residents as they move into a newer building, and how we can manage that transition in rental costs.
Sure thing, Councillor. Sorry, I just want to jump in there. That has been thought out from our side. So once the phase one is complete, the 165 units, the Maple Court residents will move directly across. So they will not be moving anywhere else. They'll stay in a unit, move across the street once the development has got occupancy permit, and they will move in either at their current rental or below market. So that is the relocation policy, I think, from Maple Ridge, and we are obviously going to abide by it. And that's the idea from our side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russell.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any. So thank you very much to the applicant and to staff.
Thank you.
Take the vote now. All in favor of sending it to tonight's meeting? Opposed? Carried. I thought I did see a red card somewhere, but it disappeared and went to green. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Next up, Madam Clerk, 5.5.
Item 5.5 is 2023-208 RZ, and it's to rezone the property at 12035 Glenhurst Street from RS1 to R4, and staff are in attendance to present.
Thank you. This presentation is for the rezoning 2023-208-RZ for the property on 12035 Glenhurst Street, requesting council to grant first reading to the zoning amendment bylaw 7958-2023. As I mentioned for the previous application, the reason that we are requesting council to grant only first reading is that this application has been received prior to July 25th, 2023. It would be subject to the old procedure. The purpose of this application is to rezone the property from RS1 single detached residential to R4 single detached infill urban residential to allow the future subdivision of the property into 2 R4 lots. And the subject site is outside of the community plan area and is surrounded by single family residential that are zoned RS1 to the north, south, and east, as well as the property that are zoned RS1B to the west that are including the smaller lot subdivision. The property currently designated urban residential under the official community plan. No further amendment to the land use designation of this property is required to support this rezoning and subdivision application. And the subject site currently contains a single family residential that will be demolished prior to final approval of this rezoning application, as well as approval of the subdivision. The property is relatively flat with the exception of some localized slope in the center, as well as the northeast portion of the property. There are significant trees along the western as well as the southern perimeter of the property that are generally going to be maintained as part of this development. Vehicular access to the site currently is from Glenhurst, and it will continue to be off Glenhurst Street as well. This is the preliminary subdivision plan showing the two future lot with a lot area of 509 square meter as well as 424 square meters, as well as including some dedication along Greenhills that would be the requirement of this rezoning application. Both proposed lot meets the minimum lot area, lot width, and lot depth requirement of the R4 zone lot. If upon council consideration of this application, this report is recommending council to grant first reading to the zoning amendment bylaw 7958-2023 and requesting the applicant provide a complete application, including all the detailed information and technical report for this rezoning as well as subdivision application. Thank you.
Councillor Youssef. And seconded by Councillor Schiller. Any questions? Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation. Just real quick, as the R4 zoning is not quite that familiar to me, if I may, through the chair to staff, how would an R4 property fit in the midst of a neighborhood of RS1 properties? The form and character, I understand, is meant to be discussed at second reading. Nevertheless, here we are.
Sure, through Madam Chair. So the R4 lots are relatively smaller. The minimum lot area for RS1 is 668 square meters, while R4 is 450 square meters. The lot width is also smaller, is a lot width of 12 meters, whereas I do believe RS1 is 18-meter lot width. So the R4 is relatively smaller. However, there is a policy in our official community plan that support the infill development, that basically allowing that, you know, if the lots are like 80% larger than the adjacent properties, we can support the rezoning that is 80% smaller. And I do believe that the properties that are zoned RS1B to the west, they basically got subdivided through the same policy. And R4 is providing lots that are 80% smaller than RS1B, which support the subdivision and rezoning of this property. So lots are relatively smaller. However, the building would be, I do believe the maximum height under R4 is 8 meters, versus the RS1B that allows the maximum height of 9.5 meters. And I do believe that the setback is also consistent or relatively consistent with RS1B zone.
Thank you for those clarifications. That gives me a little bit of information to consider for tonight's meeting. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. All right. All in favor of moving it forward to this evening's meeting? That is carried. Thank you. 5.6, Madam Chair, or Madam Chair, Madam Clerk.
Item 5.6, 2023-255RZ to rezone the property at 13285 Balsam Street from RS3 to CD 423, and staff is in attendance to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry. This application is in relation to the property located at the address on the screen, so 13285 Balsam Street, and it's here for first reading. The existing OCP designation for the subject property is medium high density residential, high density residential, neighborhood park, and conservation. The proposed OCP designations are medium high density residential and conservation. The existing zoning is RS3, single detached rural residential, and the proposed zoning is a proposed zone CD 423, medium high density townhouse residential with live work units. The existing site area is 2.3 acres and the proposed site area will be 1.7 acres, and it just involves one lot. The subject property is shown on the screen. To the south, there's also a proposed development in stream for a mixed-use commercial residential building. The official community plan context is shown on the screen. So the northern portion is currently designated conservation. The western portion is currently designated medium density residential, and the eastern portion is mostly designated medium high density residential with a little bit of neighborhood park. This is a neighborhood context map. To the north, there's Balsam Creek, single detached residential across Balsam Creek. To the west and to the east, there's single detached residential. And to the south is vacant land with an in-stream development application. This application proposes to rezone the subject property from the RS3 single detached rural residential zone to a proposed CD 423 medium high density townhouse residential zone with live work units to permit the construction of a townhouse development with 42 market strata dwelling units. Units are configured as 3-bedroom townhouses, including 9 live work units facing Balsam Street. The proposed zone amending bylaw would require the 9 dwelling units fronting Balsam Street to be live work units with the following definition added to the city's zoning bylaw. Live work unit means a use involving a dwelling unit where the occupant also uses part of the dwelling for office use and to provide professional services. Section 8.3 of the Silver Valley Area Plan encourages home-based businesses in the Silver Valley area, and the live work units are in alignment with this. A type 1 home occupation or home-based business, as permitted in the city's zoning bylaw and currently provided in the RM1 zone, would be permitted in all of the units. For the proposed development, an OCP amendment will be required. A redesignation of the east part of the site from high density residential is proposed as the development's density is consistent with the medium high density residential. I think that should say medium density residential designation. The boundary for the conservation designation will need to be adjusted based on the environmental studies that will be undertaken for the development. The proposed development would include park conservation dedication and road dedication. The density would be 0.87 floor space ratio or FSR based on the proposed lot area. It utilizes the base allowable density of 0.6 FSR for the zone and additional density of 0.27 FSR through a density bonus for a cash contribution at a rate of $344.46 per square meter for an estimated amount of $654,658. This application is subject to the community amenity contribution program at a rate of $7,400 per townhouse dwelling unit and $9,200 per single family lot for an estimated $412,400 or such rate applicable at third reading. The applicant is proposing to have vehicular access for the proposed development from a future road along the southern lot line. The proposed development meets the requirements of the city's off-street parking and loading bylaw as per the table shown on the screen. So 84 off-street residential parking spaces are required and 84 are proposed. 9 off-street residential visitor parking spaces are required and 12 are proposed. And of those 12, 5 spaces would be shared with the live work units. So 96 spaces are proposed in total, including 2 accessible parking spaces. In terms of long-term bicycle parking, storage will be provided inside individual units. And in terms of short-term bicycle parking, 7 spaces are proposed. The site plan is shown on the screen. And part of the site plan involves a 2.5 meter public easement alongside the park / conservation dedication along the northern area. This is a live work unit sketch provided by the architect. And the recommendations are that the zone amending bylaw be given first reading and that the applicant submit a complete application, including detailed information and technical reports for the official community plan amendment, rezoning, multifamily development permit, water course protection / natural features DP, and wildfire DP. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see the applicant is in the chambers. Are you just here to answer questions?
Yep, they're here to answer
Okay.
questions.
Thank
or if
you
they
very
wanna
much.
speak to anything.
A motion to move it forward, Counselor Schiller, moved by Counselor Carreras. Questions, Counselor Carreras?
Thank you. Just had a quick question around the work live zoning piece. And there's a few, I think it's only one set. There's, what was it, 9 or 7?
9 units.
9, okay. What exactly does that look like? How does it change from a regular townhouse? I think it's great. I'm just curious what
Madam Chair
it looks like.
and members of the committee. In terms of the live work unit, there's an entrance facing the street. So there's a front entrance. You come into the entry lobby, and then there's stairs going up to the townhouse unit and a door into a private office space. So the office space is directly accessible to the street. I think that's the key thing with the live work unit. Typically, if somebody has a home-based business, they'll just put an office in a bedroom, but you have to traipse the client through the entire home. So this way it's a little bit more professional and has a street presence.
Okay, so it's a more sort of official entrance on the bottom, and then the rec room, which could be on the bottom, would then be your office. And okay, so it's not like there's like a storefront on the bottom and living on top, or like Osprey where there's a storefront in the
There
front
was some
half.
discussions originally. We did some preliminary sketching for the planning staff to review. And the first one had more of a commercial frontage to it, the storefront and a separate entrance and so forth, signage band and that. But it's felt that just to fit with the neighborhood a little bit better, something more residential flavor, but still keep that entrance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Counselor Youssef, did you have your card up? No, okay. I'm not seeing any further questions. So all in favor of moving it forward to this evening? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for attending. 5.7.
Item 5.7 is 2022-03 RZ to rezone the properties at 11926, 11936, 11946, 11956 at 236th Street and 23638 Dewdney Trunk Road from RS3 to RM1 and R2. And staff are present to present the application.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application, sorry,
Is this the incorrect one? Sorry, my mistake.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. This application is in relation to the properties located at 11926, 11936, 11946, and 11956, 236th Street and 23638 Dewdney Trunk Road. And it's here for second reading. The existing OCP designation is urban residential, and the proposed OCP designation is also urban residential. The existing zoning is RS3, single detached rural residential. The proposed zoning is RM1, low density townhouse residential, and R2, single detached medium density urban residential. The existing site area is 2.6 acres, and the proposed site area is 2.5 acres, including the R2 lots, or 2.3 acres, excluding the R2 lots. The proposed lots would be 1 RM1 lot and 3 R2 lots. The subject property is outlined on the screen, and the official community plan context is shown as well. So it's designated urban residential. The neighborhood context is shown on the screen. So to the north, there's single detached residential across the road. To the northwest of the subject properties, there's townhouse residential and single family residential. To the west, there's townhouse residential across the street. To the east, there's retail, and to the south, there's single detached residential. This application proposes to rezone the subject properties from the RS3 single detached rural residential zone to the RM1 low density townhouse residential and R2 single detached medium density urban residential zones to permit a future subdivision into 1 RM1 lot and 3 R2 lots, and the future construction of a townhouse development with 52 market strata dwelling units. The units would be configured as 3-bedroom townhouses. The application is in compliance with the official community plan. The proposed development would include lot consolidation and road dedication. The proposed townhouse development would have a density of 0.75 floor space ratio and utilize the RM1's zone's base allowable density of 0.6 FSR and additional density of 0.15 FSR through a density bonus for a cash contribution at a rate of $344.46 per square meter for an estimated amount of $467,573. This application is subject to the community amenity contribution program at a rate of $7,400 per townhouse dwelling unit and $9,200 per single family lot for an estimated amount of $412,400 or such rate applicable at third reading. The applicant is proposing to have vehicular access for the townhouse development RM1 lot from 236th Street and vehicular access for the single detached residences R2 lots from the future lane extension. The proposed townhouse development meets the requirements of the city's off-street parking and loading bylaw as per the table shown on the screen. In terms of off-street residential parking, 104 spaces are required and 104 spaces are proposed. In terms of off-street visitor parking, 11 spaces are required and 13 spaces are proposed. Of the 117 total off-street parking spaces, 2 are accessible parking spaces. In terms of long-term bicycle parking requirements, there's no requirement, but they're providing storage inside individual units. And in terms of short-term bicycle parking, 8 spaces are proposed. In terms of proposed variances, there's some off-street parking design variances involved. So one of the variances is to have internal finished dimensions of 5.81 meters in width and 6.08 meters in length for enclosed double car parking garages. Another variance is to have internal finished dimensions of 3.68 meters and 6.07 meters in length for enclosed single car parking garages. And another parking design variance to have a maneuvering aisle width of 6 meters. There's also setback variances involved, as shown in the table on the screen. So in terms of the front lot line setbacks, the required setback is 6 meters, but the proposed setback is 4.5 meters from the front lot line on the eastern side. 7.5 meters is required and 5.65 meters is proposed. The interior side lot line on the northern side, 7.5 meters is required and 2.91 meters is proposed. On the interior side lot line on the southern side, 7.5 meters is required and 4.45 meters is proposed. And for the exterior side lot line on the northern side, 7.5 meters is required and 6.25 meters is proposed. In terms of the building height, there's also a variance. The city's zoning bylaw limits the maximum building height to 9.5 meters for townhouse residential principal buildings, and the applicant is seeking a variance to have a maximum building height of 11.13 meters. The site plan is shown on the screen. The 3 R2 lots are shown in the top right, and the RM1 lot is shown with the townhouse development. Sample building elevations are shown on the screen and a few perspectives. The report recommendations is that the zone amending bylaw be given second reading and be forwarded to public hearing, and that several terms and conditions be met prior to final reading. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a motion to move it forward. Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Tan. And questions, Mayor Rumi, and then Councillor Carreras. You're first.
Thank you very much for the presentation. When you were talking about long-term bike storage, you're saying that there would be accommodation inside the unit.
Yes.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about that in the sense of what is the actual size? Because a lot of these units aren't very big to begin with. And I know I live in a place that has a storage locker in the suite. It's not very big to be able to put anything in there, much less a bike. So I am concerned that we might be discouraging people from wanting to get a bike because they have nowhere to put it. But I'd like to get a little bit more information on that if you have it.
Yeah, in terms of long-term bicycle parking spaces, the storage is typically provided in the garage or some other space. It doesn't have to be a locker specifically, but it could be. And in this case, I think it's just space in the garage.
So the space would be in the garage, not
Yes.
in the actual unit.
Yes.
Okay, and then can we assume that the garage would be large enough to have car and bike storage?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Carreras.
Thank you. Two quick questions. One of them, I'm just curious about the indoor amenity area. It says it's 3 stories. Curious, what does that look like? What's in there?
I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So it's basically a community hall just for the development. It will be, and we haven't decided what we're going to put in there. But we just put a party hall there for get-togethers, and actually a pool table there, so people can have a good time. It's basically it'll have a kitchen, and it'll have a seating area, and that's how they can operate it.
So it'll be more like an open space. You can host birthday parties or family
Yes,
parties
yes,
and
yes,
gatherings
yes.
and things like that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then I have another question. This one's probably for engineering though.
Sure.
You might be off the hook for this one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Some of the discussions in the community development, the meeting that they have in the community, if I'm saying it wrong. A lot of the concerns that were raised were around traffic management, and this area is a pretty congested area, lots of townhomes, lots of kids. I'm just curious around the traffic management. I know it seems that it's still niche, but I'm curious if you can just talk us through a little bit about those requirements and how this fits in and what could change and what doesn't really need to change.
Yeah, absolutely. So through the chair, so we definitely looked into this application as a result of some of those public comments. And so what we're seeing is the connection through here to Cottonwood Drive being the closest signalized intersection on Dewdney Trunk. Cottonwood Drive, typically in the PM peak, is handling about 200 cars per hour. The capacity of that would be closer to 750 cars per hour. And so we're operating quite a bit below current capacity. So then we looked at what 52 townhomes would contribute into the local neighborhood, to the road network. And typically we're looking to see if we're going to generate 100 trips in the peak hour. And if we are, then we're going to ask the applicant to move forward with the traffic impact assessment. But at 52 townhomes, we're looking at probably in the order of 20 to 23 trips in those PM peak hours. And so we're well below that threshold to do a traffic impact assessment. All said, the engineering's assessment is that the road network is able to accommodate the additional housing and is well suited to do so.
And just one more piece in addition to that, sort of expanding around sort of active transportation pieces, because I have heard some concerns in the community around safe walking. Are there safe routes for these kids to get to and from their school? Safe crosswalks, lots of sidewalks.
Yeah, and we're just
crossings where needed. Like I just want to make sure that all these wonderful families that are moving into our community have a safe route to and from their school, if they can get registered.
And so my apologies not to jump on you there. But yes, so we have obviously the strategic transportation plan. We're working quite extensively over the last year or so. It does identify 119th Avenue as neighborhood bikeway. And that will connect into connections into town center, as well as through the school Alexander Robinson to the east, and then to 240th Street, which also has some significant improvements planned for 240th Street. And so from the active transportation side of things, I think it's situated in a good location. It's going to be close to one of those integral active transportation network routes throughout the community.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Being at the end here, I need to wave my card a little higher. Just through you to staff, when we're looking at the variance that's included in the parking by reducing, I believe it's approximately 70 centimeters that we would be reducing the width of the garage by, as well as, of course, the fact that I counted 18 tandems. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're reducing the width of the garage and it being a tandem, have staff, or if I may, through the chair also to the applicant, is that space usable for the types of vehicles, especially and specifically taken into consideration pickup trucks? Most of our residents tend to drive that type of vehicle, or an SUV. Is that type of space usable, especially in the tandem configuration that we're looking at?
I'll let the applicant speak to that.
So Councillor Yusuf, that's what we're proposing is it's going in the tandem car garage. It's going to be a one in and one out car garages. So basically one will be covered off and one will be just open an aisle. That's so for SUVs and bigger trucks, because they don't even fit into our normal car garages. So that's why we are proposing those kind of unit types and garage types to actually accommodate that part.
Thank you for that. That was my main concern, is just to make sure that the parking and the types of vehicles are fitting in within the Maple Ridge crowd, if you will. Thank you, Madam Chair. That was my question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions. So all in favor of moving this forward to this evening? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you. 5.8, Madam Clerk.
5.8, 2022-293 RZ to rezone the properties at 21,511 and 21,521 Exeter Avenue from RS1A to R4. And staff are present to present.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, this application for the above noted address on Exeter Avenue is coming forward for consideration of second reading. The area is designated urban residential right now. The existing zoning is RS1A, single detached amenity residential, and is proposed to be zoned to R4, single detached infill urban residential. The site area of the two lots, existing lots, is about 0.35 acres, and there are 3 lots proposed to be created from these 2 lots. Here's the subject map showing the lots on Exeter, just off of 215th Street. And the OCP designation showing the whole area around being urban residential. And the ortho photo showing the existing built character of the neighborhood. And as noted, the application is proposing to rezone the subject lots from RS1A to R4 to permit the future subdivision of 3 lots. The project is compliant with the OCP, which has policies that support rezoning to R4 residential in local streets such as this. Each lot will have 2 off-street parking spaces with roughed-in infrastructure capable of level 2 charging as per the parking and loading bylaw. The proposed lot sizes range from 458 square meters to 485 square meters, a little bit larger than the 450 square meter minimum in the R4 zone. The existing RS1A zone has a maximum building height of 9.5 meters of note, and the proposed R4 zoning, although smaller lots, has a maximum building height of 8 meters, a lower building height of about 1.5 meters or 5 feet. The application would be subject to the payment of 1 amenity contribution of $9,200, as only 1 additional lot is being created. And this is a proposed subdivision layout showing the 3 lots being created from the 2 on the north side of Exeter. Here's a rendering of the proposed houses from the developer fitting within the R4 zoning. And the recommendations going forward from second reading and public hearing are that there be a servicing agreement covenant registered and a security deposit received as outlined in the servicing agreement, a geotechnical report being received and a covenant registered to ensure any recommendations of report are carried out on the project. On the homes, statutory right of way would be registered for the relocation of a sewer main. There'd be also a restrictive covenant for management of stormwater as is typical in this area and removal of existing buildings. And if there'd also be a report confirming there's no underground fuel storage tanks. And if there were, then there'd be a site one investigation report required to make sure the site is clean. And there'd be a voluntary contribution as noted of $9,200 for the community amenity fund as per policy 6.31. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. I have a motion to move it forward. Councillor Youssef, second by Councillor Schiller. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of moving it forward to this evening? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. 5.9.
Item 5.9 is 2023-174 VP for 2451 Hampton Street, and it's a development variance permit, and staff are in attendance to present the application.
So this application for 20451 Hampton Street is in an area that's zoned RS1, single detached residential. The lot area of that zone is 668 square meters. The variance is to increase the building height for the construction of single family dwelling. This is the lot shown at the end of Hampton Street, just southwest, I guess, of the CPR railway, separated by one lot. This is the aerial photo showing the vacant lot and the street, 2023 orthophoto. And as noted, there's a building height variance proposed for the construction of a two-story single-family dwelling above the flood construction level, which is, by the way, 6.7 meters. The proposed home design is 2 stories with a secondary suite located on the main floor. As per the flood construction level requirements, anything below 6.7 meters must be left empty and unoccupied, and that would be a crawl space. A geotechnical covenant is required to be registered at building permit stage, confirming the flood construction level as per the site plan and topography. Of note, there's been 2 other height variances being approved for nearby properties and another consideration just after this one at this meeting. And that would constitute basically there's 5 vacant properties in the section of Hampton Street, and those previous variances and these 2 would cover off 4 of those vacant lots. So the proposed variance is to vary part 6, section 605.81 of the Maple Ridge zoning bylaw to increase the maximum building height from 8 meters to 9.34 meters to allow the construction of a single family dwelling on the site. And this is a proposed elevation of the building showing the height variance from 8 meters to 9.34 meters at the front and the back of the house and on the sides of the house. The recommendation is that the corporate officer be authorized to sign and seal DVP 2023-174 VP respecting the property located at 200451 Hampton Street. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Tan. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. 5.10.
Item 5.10, 2023-2020 VP for 2438 Hampton Street, and it's a development variance permit, and staff are present to present the application.
So this application at 20438 Hampton Street, just across the street, is very similar to the previous one. The zoning is RS1 single detached residential, and the lot size is 667.99 square meters. The variance is to allow for the construction of a single family dwelling. This is the subject lot here, outlined in red. This is the subject lot on the orthophoto showing the existing character of the street. And the variance again is to provide for the construction of a single-family dwelling, two-story dwelling above the flood construction level. Proposed design is 2 stories with a secondary suite again located on the main floor, and any floor area below the flood construction level must be empty and occupied again. This would have a geotechnical covenant required as part of the building permit stage, confirming the flood construction level. There have been 2 other height variances that have been approved in the past, plus the other one being considered just previously to this. There are 5 properties on the street that remain vacant or under construction, and these variances cover off 4 of the 5, the previous ones, and the 2 being considered today. As noted, the proposed variance is to increase the maximum height from 8 meters to 9.02 meters to allow the construction of a new single-family dwelling on the site. And this is the elevations showing the height variance from 8 to 9.02 meters on the front elevation, and then the rear elevation of the house and the side elevations of the house. And the recommendation is that corporate officer be authorized to sign and seal DVP 2023-2020 VP respecting the property located at 20438 Hampton Street. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. Motion to move it forward, Councillor Youssef, seconded by Mayor Rumi. Any questions? Mayor Rumi.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just a quick question, because it's mentioned that there would be a secondary suite.
Mhm.
What are the rules when it comes to the parking situation with secondary suites? So in this case, the main house would have, I assume, 2 parking spots.
Yes.
What about the secondary suite? What's the
So
requirement?
it requires 1 additional spot, and that can be located on a separate pad or in the driveway.
In the driveway.
Yeah.
Or a separate pad. So how do we, I mean, when we start to look at it, the last thing we want is just to force everybody onto the streets.
Right.
And then the more housing we put there, we're going to have more parking on the streets. So I'm curious to know how we're going to try to manage that so that it actually makes sense to, we're seeing this in a lot of other places that the secondary suites that have been added after, there is no parking for them. So
Right.
they're all parking on the street,
Right.
and now the streets are completely full.
Right.
How do we manage that so that doesn't happen in this situation?
So the parking space that's separate has to be a sufficient length, 6.7 meters, to be located on a separate pad, or in the driveway has to be sufficiently long to take the extra car. And so what has happened where the building department allows them to be parking the secondary suite in the driveway, basically the 2 residents would have their cars, 1 in the driveway and 1 in the parking garage inside. So they're under the control of those 2 cars, and then the other be in the adjacent parking space in the garage. So it's like a tandem and a single one parking space within the garage.
Yeah. The only thing I bring to everyone's attention is people aren't parking their cars in the garage anymore. They're using that as a storage thing, and they're parking on the streets. So would we have, do we actually have a bylaw that prevents them from parking on the street?
I would defer that to the Director of Engineering regarding.
So thank you. So through the chair to Mayor Rumi. So street parking we look at as a public resource. And so on a first come, first served basis. The only times that we start going into resident or permit only parking is if in some of our more commercial districts or near substantial parking generators such as the hospital in Maple Ridge. And so typically the street side of things we look at as first come, first served.
Okay, I am concerned overall because we're going to start to see more and more homes built with secondary suites as part of the affordability issue. How do we build homes that allow us to afford it? Is they're going to start putting in income suites. So we just need to make sure that we're not creating that situation where we have all these cars on the streets. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of moving it forward to tonight's meeting? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So 7.1.
Next item is item 7.1, the extension of the tax sale redemption period, and staff are in attendance to present this item to council.
Okay, and I'm just going to ask Mr. Thompson, you're going to open this up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor and Council. It's my privilege to introduce a new face in finance. Phoebe Chang will be introducing this item, and she comes to us from Vancouver. I'm very happy to have her. This is week 2 for Phoebe.
Okay, awesome. Welcome. Thank you for choosing Maple Ridge.
Good afternoon. I'm here to present a report for proposal of a bylaw to extend the redemption period of a property sold at tax sale last year. This bylaw extends the tax sale redemption period of a property for additional year from October 3rd, 2023 to October 3rd, 2024. This will allow the property owner additional time to redeem their property from tax sale. The city conducts a tax sale each year and offers for sale by a public auction any property on which taxes are delinquent. On October the 3rd, 2022, the property at 11655 Bernard Street sold by public auction at a tax sale due to delinquent taxes, and the city at the bid price of $50,000 was declared the purchaser. A property sold at the tax sale may be redeemed by the owner within 1 year from the date of the annual tax sale by paying the total of the upset price plus accrued interest. For the property at 11655 Bernard Street, the redemption period ends October 3rd, 2023. At present, the full amount has not been paid, but the owner has retained an agent to come into good standing for the delinquent amount. The agent is diligently working with the city staff to address the balance, and now the owner willing to pay a significant percentage of amount owing by September 21st, and the rest within a year. I also like to point out that there are no financial implications for the city associated with this report or the proposed bylaw. The tax sale debate owned to the city is secured. The report recommends the extension or tax sale redemption period bylaw number 7965-2023 be given first, second, and third reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to move it forward? Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Tan. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of moving it forward to this evening? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And there's no reports under Parks and Rec admin, so on to community forum.
Item number 10 is a community forum, and participants in the community forum are reminded that there should be no discussion of the public hearing bylaws which have not yet reached conclusion. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak to council. A second opportunity may be provided once all speakers in the queue have had an opportunity to speak. The total time allotted for the forum is 15 minutes, and if you wish to inquire about additional opportunities to address council, please contact the corporate officer. For members of the public who would like to speak during the community forum, if you are participating electronically, please use the raise hand icon, and when you are called upon, please turn on your camera and clearly state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments. And if there are any attending in the meeting in person, please come forward to the podium when the chair invites speakers and clearly state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing anyone in council chambers, so do we have anyone online wishing to speak? I'm not seeing anyone either. Nope. All right. Well, I guess that's the last time I'm on adjourn. So I'm going to call for adjournment. We're adjourned, and we